Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation. My name is Andrea Bales. I'm a registered nutritional therapist, and today I would like to talk to you about how to reduce inflammation with diet. So before I move on to that, just a little bit of background to myself. I work as a registered nutritional therapist, looking after clients who may want to lose weight, who have autoimmune diseases and chronic health problems, all of which I use nutrition, diet and supplements and lifestyle advice to do. So today I'd like to introduce you to inflammation. And I think it's really important to have a look, first of all, before we look at all the tools and tips. I think it's really important to have a look at what inflammation is. So it's really an important part of our immune response. So we actually need a certain level of inflammation because it's the body's way of healing itself after an injury, or repairing some damaged tissue, or defending itself against a pathogen or a bacteria or a virus. So in that way, inflammation is very beneficial. So imagine having a fracture. So fracturing a bone, that's a classic, inflammatory response would be that you would have pain, you would have swelling, you would become immobile in that area. There may be some heat and there may be some redness. Those are the classic signs of inflammation. But that means that your body's protecting itself. It's there to protect you from moving that fractured area and damaging it any further. So this is what we call acute inflammation. So when we look at the differences between acute inflammation and chronic inflammation, there's a very different thing going on. So as I said, the acute inflammation is a classic injury, or a torn ligament, or a wound. But if we think about chronic inflammation, this is where it becomes more systemic. It's kind of what I call low grade. It's something that's kind of going on underneath and niggling away, and that can be for months and it can be for years. So most chronic inflammation has actually been linked to all the major health diseases that we experience today. And it's partly due to an excess of free radicals. And free radicals are these little molecules that damage our cells, basically. So they're things that are produced from over-oxygenation, and they actually damage cells. So we don't need to know much more than that at this stage. But one of the things is that if this is a repetitive cycle where this chronic inflammation continues and continues, then we start to see inflammation affecting the body more seriously. So research shows us that if you have an unresolved inflammatory response, then you are likely to then go on and develop major degenerative diseases, such as heart disease or diabetes. Cancer is a classic inflammatory condition. These things are linked to, inflammation is also linked to obesity and being overweight. We know that interferes with the inflammatory responses. It makes weight loss much more difficult when the body is inflamed as well. But let's have a look then at how chronic inflammation can damage your body. And I think, it's really important to think about the early warning signs that don't always show themselves as inflammation. So if you start to think about brain health, memory loss, and cognitive decline, well, those are the early warning signs for neurodegenerative disease, like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. We know that from a cardiovascular risk perspective, if you have high blood pressure or you have raised cholesterol levels, the research shows that those left untreated, left unsupported, in a state of inflammation can then lead to much more serious cardiovascular diseases. And in worst case scenarios, it can lead to heart attacks. So, the abnormal growth of healthy cells, well, the classic example of that are cancerous tumors. And that is, something that nobody wants. And sadly, today, cancer is on the increase. A compromised digestive function is another example where inflammation is taking place. So inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are classic examples of chronic inflammation. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is another sign of inflammation. And of course, you'd have things like gastroesophageal reflux disease. So acid reflux, that's another inflammatory thing going on in the digestive system. And so it goes on. And I think that it is very, very important that we understand how chronic inflammation can damage the body. So when we look at what causes inflammation, then I think this statement is very, very true. The food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. So let's have a look then at some of the causes of inflammation. The 5 key factors. Now, this is number 1 on my list. The imbalance of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. So I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail in just a second on my next slide, because this is absolutely essential for keeping inflammation under control. Not enough fruit and vegetables. And again, never mind 5 a day. I mean, we really should be aiming for 7 to 10 a day in order to get enough fruit and vegetables. Inflammatory cooking methods are another cause. So when you think about fried foods, high temperature cooking, smoked foods, those cooking methods are actually causing more inflammation internally. And this is inflammation that very often is not visible to the human eye. So you will see about that in a second. I've already mentioned being overweight or obese being a cause of inflammation. And then excessive free radicals. Well, smoking is the obvious thing that causes a massively increased amount of free radicals. Sugar increases free radical activity. The chemicals and the environment that we're exposed to as well are also increasing that level of inflammation. So let's just pop our biology hats on for a second and have a look at how inflammation really does affect our cells. So if you go back to your school days and remember the single cell and the biology in the biology class, every single cell in the human body has a cell membrane. And the cell membrane is made up mostly of fats. It's a fat lipid layer. We call it a lipid layer because it's made up of fats. And the 2 fats that are involved in that lipid layer, in the main, are omega-3 and omega-6. Now, when that level of omega-3 and omega-6 are out of balance, i.e., you have too much omega-6 in that lipid layer, then what happens is your cell will become very inflamed, and rigid and hard, which means that the nutrients that you're taking in through your diet can't penetrate that cell wall. Then you have the same reverse effect, that once you've processed any nutrients, the waste products and the toxins that are then produced in that cell cannot be excreted effectively. So you end up with a damaged cell. So if you think that in the body there are, I think it's something like 470 million different types of cells, we are made up of cells, affecting very different areas of the body, then once we start to see inflammation in the cell walls, you can then see how disease progresses because the cell becomes more and more damaged. So going back to the omega-3 and the omega-6 levels, omega-3 is something that we have to consume. They're called essential fatty acids for a reason, and that's because we need them. Omega-6, on the other hand, is the fatty acid that, if you remember at the beginning, we need to have enough omega-6 to have that initial inflammatory response, so that when you have that fracture or that injury, your immune system reacts in the correct way. And omega-6 does that. But once omega-6 becomes too high and there's an excess of omega-6, it turns to inflammation. So it is so important to understand that the way in which we get a healthier cell is to increase our intake of omega-3 fats to overcome the excess of omega-6 fats that we now find in our diets and in our foods. And I will explain more about that in a second. Because once you have a lovely, healthy cell membrane and the balance of omega-3 and the balance of omega-6 are correct, then your nutrients can flood through that lovely, permeable, soft, flexible cell membrane, do lots of functions within the cell, and then, of course, the excess wastes and the toxins that get produced can also be excreted out much more effectively and efficiently. So that is a really important aspect. And the World Health Organization recommends that we have a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 of 3:1. Now, I actually use something called a balance test that will actually take your test. We can find out results. So if anybody is interested in having a look at their balance of omega-6 to omega-3, then do let me know. There's my contact details, will be at the end of this presentation. But I take my family's omega-6 to 3 ratio every 6 months, and it's so important. So what happens when we have this cellular inflammation? Where does that come from? What's causing that level of cellular inflammation? Well, these are the things, sadly, in our diet that are causing it. Sugar, number one, excess sugar. We all know that we're exposed to too much sugar, but it's very addictive. Our refined carbohydrates that we find in white flour products, white rice, and lots of potatoes. I'm talking about fries and things like this. Excessive gluten intake can cause cellular inflammation. Conventionally raised meat and dairy. So most of our meat, dairy is produced on farms. It's farmed, it's not necessarily grass-fed. So we are feeding those animals and those cows for the dairy farm foods that are probably high in inflammatory products, particularly omega-6. The farm-raised fish. So farm-raised fish, I can guarantee that if you go to any supermarket and you pick up a packet of salmon, it will say farmed salmon. Now, in order for those farmed fish to become oily, they feed the farmed fish omega-6. And again, I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. Processed meats, your salamis, your hams, things like that are all going to cause cellular inflammation. Trans fats, hydrogenated fats. And then we also have to talk about things like highly processed vegetable and seed oils, so canola, sunflower, corn oils, peanut oils. These are all the very cheap vegetable oils, but unfortunately, they're very high in omega-6, which means that they cause this cellular inflammation. And then we have things like monosodium glutamate and food additives and preservatives. These all cause inflammation too. And artificial sweeteners. Some countries have banned them, not ours, but some countries have. So there we go. Those are the foods that will upregulate your inflammation and create extra cellular damage. So here we are. We now have some solutions to reduce inflammation and inflammatory conditions. And I just want to explain at this stage that this is what I use in my protocols with any client that comes to me with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, difficulty losing weight, thyroid conditions, digestive complaints. We always start with an anti-inflammatory diet, and we're going to look at the details of that. But also, we need to think about hydration. We need to think about exercise, our stress management, our sleep management. And then there are some key anti-inflammatory nutrients which we can all use regularly in our diet to help keep this inflammation under control. So number one on my list then here is hydration, water. It's absolutely vital for life. We can't live without it, but we don't drink enough. And again, remember the lovely, flexible, permeable cell, that needs hydrating too. So drinking up to 2 litres a day is perfect. And, you know, that's a really important fact. And I don't need to go into that in any more detail. I think also that if you are, you know, working, living in the 21st century, managing families, managing elderly parents, today's life is pressured. And none of us generally take time out to manage our stress and sleep enough. And sleep management is so important because without adequate sleep, your body cannot repair those damaged cells. So the damaged cells continue to stay damaged. So when you're asleep and you go into good quality deep sleep, that is when the repair work starts. So making sure that you're sleeping well is important. Stress management is also essential, and that's about doing things that help you to switch off. It's about mindfulness. It may well be about breathing and relaxation strategies. It may be as simple as going for a walk out in nature. It may be that you need a regular massage in order to relieve the tension and the muscular tension that you might be holding on to. But all of those things are so, so important to help reduce inflammation. Movement and exercise. Well, we know for a fact that the research shows us that we all feel better when we exercise. And actually not only feeling better, but the chemicals that are produced when we move and we exercise regularly help to keep inflammation under control. So anything that's, you know, just a regular small amount of movement daily, whether that's a regular walk or whether it's a yoga class or whether you're doing Pilates or whether you're burning it out in the gym, whatever it is that floats your boat, just try and do it. I always say that if we can manage to do some form of moderate exercise for about 150 minutes a week, that's what we should be aiming for. So movement and exercise is another one. Now, the anti-inflammatory diet. So an anti-inflammatory healing diet will lower inflammatory markers in the blood. It will restore cellular health, and it will reduce the severity of pain and health conditions. And I have witnessed this time and time again with my clients who come in with joint pains, who come in with headaches, migraines, digestive complaints. When we start to take out the foods that are causing that inflammation and we replace them with healthy anti-inflammatory foods, we see changes. So I actually recommend the Mediterranean diet as a basis. If you use the Mediterranean diet as your daily kind of go-to, and I'm not talking about your baguettes, pain au chocolat and croissant type of diet. I'm talking about things like fish, healthy, lean, protein-based, meats and things like this. Your legumes, like your pulses, which are your beans, peas, and lentils. Whole grains, so things like oats and brown rice and maybe some quinoa. And also making sure that you have olives and olive oils and oily fish, and then fruits and vegetables. Nothing that's packaged, nothing that's processed, nothing that's coming out of a square tray that you need to prick and pop in the microwave. Ideally, we can actually create foods and meals very, very quickly. It's just about getting into a new habit and creating those new habits with fresh ingredients. It really doesn't take very long to do that once you create a new habit. So I think we need to eat the rainbow, all those different colored fruits and vegetables and foods provide you with all the different phytonutrients. Those are plant nutrients that we need in order to reduce inflammation and keep inflammation under control. The orange foods with the beta carotene in, which is great for eye health, the red foods, the tomatoes, the red peppers, your pomegranates high in vitamin C's. So all these different foods, all the green vegetables, your leafy greens, your sort of watercress, broccoli, spinach, high in iron and minerals. So every single food that comes out of the ground or off a tree is actually high in these phytonutrients, lots and lots of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, so important to keep your inflammation under control. So these are my top anti-inflammatory foods from a, easy to get hold of, easy to include daily kind of list. So all of the berries, think of blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, cherries, blackcurrants. It's not very often we see blackcurrants in this country, but they are available. You can get them frozen. So eating those and including those in your daily diet is really, really important from a fruits perspective. And the vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, asparagus, beetroot, chard is very high, and mushrooms. So mushrooms are amazing, very, very anti-inflammatory. They actually help overcome viruses, depending on the types of mushrooms that you're choosing. But basically, these are all great sources of antioxidants and phytonutrients, those vitamins and minerals that we need to keep inflammation under control. So let's have a look at some of those key anti-inflammatory nutrients then that I wanted to talk to you about. So the first one has to be the omega-3 rich oily fish. And this is so important because actually omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. So if you have a pain, if you have a joint pain, rather than taking painkillers, you should be taking omega-3 rich oily fish. Now you can take it in a supplement as well, which is what I do. It's what all my family do, because getting good quality, wild caught omega-3 rich oily fish is very, very difficult. Because, the fish that are on the farms, well, fish are no better than us at actually making omega-3. So we can't make omega-3 in the body. We have to consume that omega-3. And fish in the wild also have to consume omega-3. And they get it from algae that float around in the Arctic waters. So then think about those farmed fish up in the Scottish Highlands or wherever they're being farmed. If they're not being fed scraps from omega-3 oily fish or algae from omega-3, then they're not going to be containing rich sources of omega-3. So I often recommend to control your inflammation, get that cellular health back where it should be, then we need to be looking at supplementing. And I recommend Zinzino Balance Oil, which is one of the best products I've ever come across, because what they did with this product was that not only have they got amazing omega-3 in there, they also added olives. And that means that the polyphenols, the antioxidants in the olives, protect the omega-3 within the bottle, within that oil, which means that it's active in the body for a lot longer, which means that it has much, much better cellular effects. Okay, so one of the other anti-inflammatory nutrients is ginger. Now, ginger root has a long tradition of being really effective at alleviating lots of medical, stomach-related, digestive-related symptoms. So we know that it can relieve wind, it can relieve spasms, it can actually help with nausea as well. But lots and lots of people use ginger daily because it's a massive, massive source of antioxidants, which means that it's going to help to keep your inflammation under control. A study that was carried out on participants who had rheumatoid arthritis, they took 50 grams of lightly cooked ginger root every single day. They incorporated it into their food. And they experienced, after a period of time, substantial improvements in their joint pain, in their joint mobility, and reduced inflammation. So it's a really powerful, ever so simple to add to the diet nutrient. Turmeric. Now, turmeric again is a root, and you can see on this slide the picture of the root there. Most of us use the powder in cooking, but it's loaded with something called curcuminoids, which are antioxidants that powerfully reduce inflammation, and they improve the detoxification to help reduce risks of cancer and risks of cancerous cells being formed in the body. You can actually use turmeric in many dishes. You can I sprinkle it into my granola in the morning. I make what I call a coconut anti-inflammatory milk. So if you use coconut milk, you add a spoonful of turmeric powder and a glug of honey or maple syrup, you can actually make quite a pleasant drink. And if you chill that can actually be a really nice summer drink, getting those great antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties of turmeric. Turmeric is best absorbed when you mix it with black pepper. So pop a grind of black pepper into this concoction, if you like, and it will get absorbed into the cells and have those properties actively working on inflammation for you. Apple cider vinegar is another one of my recommended foods that you can, again, incorporate every single day. It's a fermented tonic, really, and it's absolutely loaded with enzymes and organic acids that we need to improve digestive function. They help to stabilize your blood sugar, it reduces inflammation, and it even improves your skin tone. So think about it like adding a squeeze of lemon to water, so you can use it as you know, an addition to your water in the daytime. Or I make a salad dressing. So I incorporate apple cider vinegar with a little bit of my olive oil, and I use that over my salads. But it's great as a digestive as well. So if you are somebody who struggles with acid indigestion, just taking a dessert spoonful of apple cider vinegar mixed with a little bit of water just before you eat a main meal means that you're going to be able to digest those proteins so much more effectively. And also it will help this inflammatory response as well. So very quickly, the Zinzino Health Protocol is something that I strongly recommend for anybody struggling with any chronic health or chronic inflammation, because what we are doing here is we are using the omega-3 balance oil to help the cellular balance. We are restoring your digestive function with a prebiotic fiber blend, which helps keep inflammation under control in the gut. And the multivitamin, multimineral, multi-immune support supplement that's in a tablet form helps to make sure that you're getting all those plant nutrients and antioxidants. It's a very, very simple protocol that is based around supporting chronic inflammation. If anybody would like to know more about this, I'm more than happy to do a free call, a free consultation with you to tell you more about those products so that we can have a more detailed discussion. So these are my contact details. Please, I'm aware that you may have questions based around some of the information that I've just discussed. Please send me an email. That's the best way to get hold of me. And if you'd like to register your interest in the Zinzino protocol, then pop that in an email to me and I'll get in touch with you. But I would just like to say thank you very, very much for taking time to listen to me today. And I look forward to speaking with you very soon. Thanks then. Bye-bye.